In 1961, President Kennedy called on all Americans to rise to the challenges of the day. He knew that success depended upon the unity of efforts throughout the federal government and the nation. In a memorandum he wrote, "I want coordination of government activities outside of Washington significantly strengthened across departments and agency lines." From this, federal executive boards were born. The Greater Boston Federal Executive Board, one of 28 across the country, fosters communication, coordination, and collaboration with federal, state, and local government agencies. It is our hope that through this series, folks will learn about the mission and work done by different agencies, what that means for our country, and more specifically, what that means to each of us as individuals. This is your federal government, and I am your host, Diane LeBlanc. Hello everyone. Today we are featuring the Food and Drug Administration's Winchester Engineering and Analytical Center, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm very grateful to have two guests with us today. Brian Baker, who is the director of the center, which is located in Winchester, Massachusetts, and Dr. Elazar Edelman, who is a professor at MIT and a member of the Science Board to the Food and Drug Administration. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Diane.
Brian, I'm going to start with you. Give folks a little bit of the history of the Food and Drug Administration and talk a little bit about the FDA's overall mission.
Sure. Put yourself back in the Wild West, where a snake oil salesman shows up with this magical elixir. And this is about the time when there was concern for drugs and the effects of drugs on people. And so we found in 1906, thereabout, Theodore Roosevelt signed into law the first Food and Drug Act. And there have been any number of dozens of amendments each year over the decades. And typically, they correlate with some public health emergency. 1937, sulfanilamide elixir was used, and there was some, what basically is antifreeze in this, killed 107 people. So tighter controls were placed and amendments made to the Food and Drug Act.
What products does the Food and Drug Administration regulate?
That's a good question. I guess I'd start by telling you 50 cents on every dollar that Americans spend is on a product regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, from cosmetics to foods, obviously, and drugs, medical devices, vaccines, biologics, now tobacco, veterinary medicine, and food. So a substantial oversight role.
Now, how does the FDA organize itself to be able to address all of these different products?
We're currently about 14,000 strong across the country. We have 7 centers, each one for those specialty areas that we spoke about, food and drugs and medical devices. And then we have the field organization, Office of Regulatory Affairs, which is where my lab fits. Within that organization, it's the largest center. There are about 4,000 people distributed all over the country. 13 labs like mine that work on different areas, and 20 districts around the country.
What does your lab specialize in? Do you have a unique mission?
We do. As you might imagine, with a name like Winchester Engineering and Analytical Center, we are the sole laboratory for the FDA that does post-market, aftermarket testing for all medical devices, as well as electronic products that radiate, radiation-emitting electronic products. We have a food safety mission as well, and our particular niche there is with radiation testing of foods like perhaps we saw from Japan.
So you're involved in work that ensures medical devices are safe for the consuming public, to ensure that food products are safe for the consuming public, and other products that we might have in our homes and be exposed to on a daily basis. Talk a little bit more about the medical devices that you regulate.
Sure. I'd like to sort of split that conversation in two pieces. One is medical devices, and the other is radiation-emitting electronic products. You may know that about 50% of all our medical devices or components from devices are imported. Now just imagine...
I did not know that.
Just imagine the complexity now to manage all these components from countries abroad. And so you can imagine that we are a global agency with a domestic mission, and that's clearer each year. So the kinds of products that we focus on here could be as simple as a medical glove to prevent the spread of AIDS, or we do analyses on condoms, some very basic things, to heart valves or stents, or some very complicated medical devices.
It's fascinating. And Dr. Edelman, I think I'm going to kind of move over to you at the moment. Tell us a little bit about your work with the WEAC lab and the Food and Drug Administration, and the partnership that you have with them.
So under Dr. Baker's leadership, we've established what is a fairly unique relationship between scientists at the Food and Drug Administration and scientists in academia. It's unique because it really hasn't happened to any great extent before. And what it allows us to do is to seize on important issues related to public health, to understand how and why they may be challenging or problematic, and then to propose solutions to them.
And how long has this partnership been in existence?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about now coming on 3 years.
That's right.
So did MIT find the federal government, or did the federal government knock on your door and propose this partnership? How did that work?
It's probably a little bit of both. I think that the one distinct advantage we have is that we have someone who is a leader and has been a leader in both domains. So Dr. Baker's trained and has spent time at MIT and holds an important leadership position at FDA. He knows both domains. I also have worked a portion of my time not only at MIT but working with FDA, and so I think it is that we found each other.
Nice, and certainly a partnership that serves the American people. Now, in terms of the work that's going on a daily basis at MIT under this partnership, what does that look like? How many students, how many staff are actually working on the project that you're working on at the moment?
In some respects, a little difficult to say, because one of the wonderful things is that MIT becomes a true partner with FDA, and while we have central people directing the work, the efforts inculcate themselves into the very spirit and DNA of our research center at MIT. Everyone becomes aware of it, everyone becomes to some degree or another a part of it, and everyone learns from it. We have extremely talented people. Kay Furman is a graduate student in our center who's directing a good deal of the work, and she's worked very, very closely with Jerry Desani and under Dr. Baker. But there are very many undergraduates, graduate students, even postdoctoral fellows and junior faculty who contribute to what we do.
I mean, Brian, this really is a phenomenal partnership, and obviously you had an awful lot to do with it, but what does the financial arrangement look like between the federal government and MIT, and what where does the authority for the partnership come from? Is that an informal agreement? Is there a formal agreement?
We work very closely with partners, academia, some industry partners, states, other federal agencies. And as we address a particular public health issue, increasingly more medical devices posing significant risk perhaps to the public, we need to develop the expertise and the experience to do that work. So we turn to those in the know. And so in this collaboration with Dr. Edelman, the expertise he brings and that of his students helps my people learn how to look at those devices.
I'm a PhD candidate in health sciences and technology at MIT, and I'm part of this broader collaboration between FDA and MIT. It really catalyzed through the Idea Squared program, which matched me up with mentors here at WEAC, including Brian Baker and Jerry Destiny, which allowed me to establish work that relates with Food and Drug Administration's real push towards safety and efficacy in medical devices, and bring that down to an academic and scientific level with my work with Professor Edelman at MIT. So our work involves testing of medical devices, specifically stents, which are to treat heart attacks. And our work is advancing the mechanical testing of these devices to make sure that they're really put through their paces before they're implanted in patients, to make sure that we understand not only if they fracture, but when they do fracture, what happens and what sort of complications can we look for in patients.
And one thing that we can do is bring resources to bear. And so based on the public health need to look at that particular device, I'm able to make the case to the agency that said, I need this equipment, I need these supplies, and we're going to tackle this problem. And so those decisions are made based on the public health safety. And as we can make a compelling argument to work together to achieve a public health issue, then we're successful in getting resources.
Dr. Edelman, you are a member of the advisory board to the Food and Drug Administration, the Science Advisory Board. What sort of a commitment is that? How often does that board meet? What role do you play?
So the board meets as a group 3 to 4 times a year. Next meeting is coming up next week. We work closely with Dr. Baker's counterparts, including chief scientist and commissioner and the various directors. It's an interesting and eclectic group that includes some leading scientists across the United States. And then we, as subcommittees, try to work closely with various component parts, the centers that were alluded to help them push their increasingly evolving and complex mission forward.
And I'm guessing when you're there, it's an opportunity to maybe do a little bit of bragging about the partnership that we have here locally in Massachusetts and the good work that's being done.
So the truth is that the partnership speaks for itself. I don't actually need to do any bragging. It's very well known. It's been cited time and again at the meetings as an example of a true partnership, of a pioneering partnership, of an exceedingly productive partnership. And I actually never have to brag. Everyone already knows well about it.
There you go.
I can say there are many talented people working on projects like this. And the engineer that I have heading up that particular project was named the Scientist of the Year. So that's the caliber of FDA investment, is that we bring bright people who do great work, and my role's simple. Shine a light on great work and good people, and good things happen.
I suspect you're a very modest person.
So he's so modest that he was named actually one of the employees and scientists, engineers of the year at the FDA.
Very nice and very well deserved from what I understand. Let's talk about the food supply. In doing a little bit of research for today, I learned that the folks at your center actually test samples from within a 10-mile radius of nuclear power plants across our country. How long have you been doing that, and what have you found?
Sure. We have a surveillance program for virtually anything that would be unhealthy for the public, from pesticides to metals to, in this case, radiation. And in this case, there are 104 power plants in the country, and we sample food from around a number of them each year to ensure that there aren't any issues. There are not, I can tell you, and there has not been. It's a very safe industry. And we do that also in an emergency situation, back in 3 Mile Island or in Europe or with Japan, for example. And it's important for us to know that the American food supply is safe. And I can tell you, after about 1,300 food analyses recently, the American public is safe and the food is good.
Good news, certainly. You mentioned Japan. When the earthquake hit in 2011 and the nuclear reactor, there was an explosion. What sort of an impact did that have on the folks at the center in Winchester?
I'd like to simply tell a story of one of our analysts, who's a mother as well. And she went home after she learned of that, and she talked to her kids that, guess what I need to do now? And she needed to keep our food safe. She came to work at midnight, prepared for the analyses to be done, and the first shipment came in, imported from Japan, at about 6 a.m. And we had all hands to work on that. The second shipment came in at 11, the third at 2, and so this group of people, radiochemists by training, worked a 24-hour shift and ensured that we analyzed these samples and get the results back to the importer within 2 hours. Because if you're talking fresh produce,
Of course.
and it's at the port of Los Angeles, and UPS'd to Winchester in Massachusetts overnight, we need to ensure that the food is safe, but we also need to facilitate commerce, because we don't want that food rotten on the docks.
So she came back to work at midnight. Is that a typical occurrence at the center? Do you have people working 24-hour shifts?
In this case, we were responding to an emergency. And so I can absolutely tell you that when there's a foodborne outbreak, when there's an emergency, absolutely we galvanize the troops and put in whatever time's required to include weekend and shift work. On a more routine basis, we're looking at staffing the office from 6 a.m. perhaps to 6 p.m. with varying shifts for our people.
And what were the results of the testing done at that time related to the food supply? And are you still testing imports from Japan?
We are. As I said, we've done, as of today, I believe it's 1,267 samples. They come in virtually every day, where the FDA collects foods at point of import, and they're flagged, in effect, based on the prefecture they're coming from, how close they were to that accident, and any concerns that we may have. They're sampled at Los Angeles or other points and sent for testing.
Now, do the folks in Winchester test food supplies being imported from other countries other than Japan?
The agency has a worldwide mission, and our role in that is twofold. One is for microbiological testing for foodborne outbreaks, and the other is this radionuclide analyses. And we have a current surveillance program where we randomly take samples, and we also have a directed sample collection based on risk that we may see around the world.
Now, I know at one time your staff tested things like TVs, but things have changed and you're no longer putting your time and your efforts into that, but you do test other products that most of us would have in our homes, such as microwaves. Talk a little about that.
We spoke earlier about the medical device part of our mission. This piece is for radiating emitting electronic products, from sun lamps when you go to a tanning bed, to microwaves, formerly TVs when they were of concern, which hasn't been the case for 20 years. Dental x-rays, handheld dental x-rays have been an issue of late. And we do these analyses to ensure the products are performing as they're supposed to. And if they emit more radiation than they should, they're taken off the market.
So with so many potential products to test and to regulate, how do you decide which products to actually test?
The agency just rolled out a program for import locations, and there are some 50 or 60 odd locations around the country, and it's called PREDICT, and it's a risk-based model that takes a look at the products coming into the country. What's the probability that that particular product may be dangerous to the public? And they look at medical device reports from hospitals and recalls and any number of indicators that would tell us this product should get a closer look and this one is pretty safe. And by prioritizing this work, we're able to focus our finite resources in the right area to ensure we protect the American people.
Now, is there any other center in the country that does exactly what the Winchester Engineering and Analytical Center does?
No, I can truly say that this group of 70 people, microbiologists, chemists, physicists, engineers, are unique. They truly are special. There is no other center that does this testing for medical devices, and there's no other center that does the food testing for radiation. We do share the mission for microbiological analyses with a number of other labs. And as you might expect, when there's an outbreak of some kind, it's important that you bring all resources to bear. And the agency galvanizes WEAC to help, and a number of other labs.
Now, we talked a little bit about your role as the director, which you simplified. Tell folks how you came to be the director, what your background is, and again, what is your role on a daily basis?
Well, I'm a retired Army colonel, and I retired in 2005, having taught at MIT. So there's the MIT connection. And I retired and took a job with the private sector, thinking that I wanted to go make big bucks. Okay. And I was there for 2 years as a VP of an engineering firm, and it just was not satisfying to me. And so having served for 25 years in the military, I made the decision that it's a much better fit for me to find public service. And this particular job came open that fit my background. I'm an engineer. I went to MIT, and I know we need to do this collaboration because these medical devices are so complex that we need to keep pace with science. And we're better to do that with the most preeminent institute for science and technology, in my view, in the world. So this is what brought me to the FDA, and I'm delighted to be here now 3.5 years.
Well, thank you for that, because I'm sure when you went to the private sector, you were probably being paid a whole lot more, but as you say, the work that you're doing now is just so much more rewarding, and you truly are impacting the lives of Americans every single day. So the premier partnership with MIT, just so wonderful, and again, such an asset to the American public. Do you have any other partnerships with organizations or state or local government that you'd like folks to know about?
Sure. I guess I would say is we leverage every partnership possible so that we can bring expertise and resources from one area, whether it's an academic institution, a federal partner, a state partner, and to the extent we can bring resources to bear for a common goal, then we do that. I mean, I work very hard to develop partnerships with the Department of Defense, in particular on nanotechnologies. We're looking to detect foodborne bugs in a food manufacturing plant before the outbreak happens. So with a handheld device, we're hoping to take that swipe there, be able to look at this and understand there's bacteria there. We better hold the product for now and then do confirmatory analyses. And we believe we could prevent a foodborne outbreak by doing that. So that's one example of another partnership we have with the Department of Defense.
Wonderful. Dr. Edelman, is there anything that I didn't ask you about the partnership between MIT and the FDA that I should have that's important?
I think not, but I do think it's important to understand that the FDA, because of inspired leadership, is really transforming not simply into a body that determines risk or safety, but into the premier institute of regulatory sciences around the world. And just as 50% of products come in from around the world, 100% of the world looks to define safety of devices and foods and drugs by what the FDA does. So this is a somewhat unique time. It's a time of an explosion of emerging technologies, of technologies that make use of a wide variety of disciplines in the same package, but also at a time when the entire world is focusing on and relying on the FDA. And it's only the combined leadership, this extraordinary vision that Dr. Baker's put together that allows for this to serve, for the FDA to serve that emerging and complex mission.
There you go. There was something that I needed to ask you. Now, if somebody wants to learn more about the Food and Drug Administration, how do you suggest they go about doing that?
Well, I think this is a perfect example, right, for you to invite us here to talk about our mission and how it impacts the public. I think is a tremendous public service for the cable companies to tell the American public exactly what we do. We have a lot of web-based information centralized in Washington that begins with the overall agency mission, and it's broken down sort of in a tiered way that gets to each subordinate organization. And so somewhere in there, they would talk about our role as it fits within the whole agency.
I actually enjoyed looking at the FDA website. I was particularly fascinated by the section on veterinary medicine and what the FDA is doing to keep our pets safe, which was something that I hadn't considered. I knew you were keeping our food supply safe. I knew that you were testing our drugs, but I quite honestly did not understand the full scope of everything that the FDA did. Now, what else haven't I asked you that you think it's important to share with the viewing public?
Well, first, I would say my colleague just went to China, is in country in China now, looking at the turkey pet treat issue. And there is a manufacturing issue where it's causing our dogs to get sick and sometimes killing them. So this level of interaction between the U.S. and foreign countries is critical, and one of the roles the FDA plays now. In terms of other things, I guess I'd simply like to say to the public, we've had a number of issues with products that you use every day that the scientists in my lab have worked on, to include contact eye lens solution. An interesting case recently was counterfeit surgical mesh. So some 5,000 operations took place, and we find that the mesh that was used is not sterile and it's not authentic. The edges fray. So scientists in my laboratory, for example, did the analyses and said, there's bugs in this, it's not safe to use. And the agency reacted very swiftly. They came to our laboratory. They did a video public health message and put it out on YouTube so that we could get the message out as quickly as we can to health providers and the American public.
FDA is warning healthcare professionals and medical facilities about counterfeit versions of polypropylene surgical mesh. These products are labeled with the CR Bard Davol brand name, but they were not manufactured by Bard.
FDA is investigating this situation. We're testing samples of the counterfeit mesh to see whether it meets the authentic product specifications, including strength, sterility, and performance. We're also working to find out who may be responsible for the counterfeiting and how the distribution occurred.
Here are FDA's recommendations for healthcare professionals and facilities. First, if you have surgical mesh labeled as CR Bard, check your stock against the sizes and lot numbers of the counterfeit products. You'll find that information on our website. If your mesh matches any of the counterfeit sizes and lots, don't use it. Examine polypropylene mesh products from all manufacturers for anything unusual that might indicate the product could be counterfeit. If you think your mesh may be counterfeit, contact the manufacturer listed on the label. Also, contact the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations at 1-800-551-3989. If you suspect that a counterfeit mesh was implanted in a patient, monitor the patient as you would with any polypropylene mesh implant. And finally, report any adverse events to FDA's MedWatch program.
FDA now has more information on the counterfeiting of Bard flat polypropylene surgical mesh, commonly known as Marlex mesh. This was first reported earlier this year. The counterfeit products, which were distributed between October 21, 2008 and October 27, 2009, were labeled with the CR Bard Davol brand name, but they weren't manufactured by Bard.
FDA testing has now found that the counterfeit samples are not sterile, although they're labeled as sterile. And that can mean an increased risk of infection if they're implanted in a patient. FDA tests have also shown that the weave pattern and the structure of the counterfeit mesh is different from the authentic. Also, the counterfeit may not have properly finished edges, which could allow it to unravel. FDA is continuing to test samples of the counterfeit mesh as part of its ongoing investigation.
Here's what we know at this point about how the counterfeit mesh was distributed. Ram Medical Incorporated, a medical product distributor, sold the counterfeit products to 6 different distributors. These firms then sold them to hospitals or possibly to other distributors. Ram Medical is recalling all of the counterfeit mesh from the lots shown on our website.
Here's what healthcare professionals and facilities should do. Go to our website to see the lot numbers of the counterfeit products. If you have surgical mesh from any of these lots and it came from one of the 6 distributors used by Ram Medical, contact Ram at 973-633-0400 for instructions on returning it. Now, you'll find the names of those distributors on our website. If you have mesh from one of the listed lots but it came from another distributor, contact Bard at 1-800-556-6275 to see if it's authentic. Examine your stock of polypropylene mesh from other manufacturers. If you notice anything in the packaging or labeling that might indicate a counterfeit product, contact the manufacturer and FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations at 1-800-551-3989.
We've done a number of other interesting things lately. We've dealt with some criminal cases. Criminal cases where you might buy some medical device on the internet, and it's supposed to, I'll exaggerate a little bit, cure cancer, or do something that it purports to do, and of course has no medical basis. So we work with our U.S. attorneys. We do the analyses here, working with the attorneys. We're often called to do expert testimony, and as a result, we have some criminal convictions recently in New Jersey,
It really is incredible, and thank you for sharing those examples, because I think it puts in perspective for folks the large number of items that really the FDA is looking at, again, to keep consumers safe. We are out of time. I want to thank our guests, Director Brian Baker and Dr. Edelman, for joining us and for helping us to better understand the work of the Winchester Engineering and Analytical Center in its role in keeping medical products and our food supply safe, not just in Massachusetts, but across our country. I thank you for watching, and I hope that you will continue to join us as we feature other federal agencies on your federal government.